Welcome to Tomes of the Traveler, brought to you by the Bread and Bone Pod. Oh, that's completely the wrong podcast. Welcome to the Stain on. Welcome to the Tomes of the Traveler, brought to you by the Zealots of Birbio. This episode, we will be talking about the powers within the true RPG system, and explaining all of the rules and facets of such powers. So in this video, we'll go through all of the specifics, all of the little details, the itty-gritty, and also just overall explain the importance of powers and how to work them as both a game master and how to choose them as a player in a true RPG system game. So let's jump right into it. So first, the concept of powers aligns with the concept of feats in D&D, or other class-specific skills or that sort of thing in other RPGs. So the point of a power in the true RPG is to make it so that the player character has a way of progressing and getting better and, in a way, leveling up. But powers, you can level up and you can pretty much choose your own pathways and choose your own class, really. And since the true RPG is a classless RPG system, this is pretty much the way that you can pigeonhole your character into a certain class, or you can keep it as broad as possible and get some things from Booksmart, some things from Central Physical Prowess, some things from Relatable. You can just mix it up, right? But also, in a way, if you want, you can go weird and just weird. And so you can just like max out on magic in a certain way. And so in this system, the doors are open to you to decide exactly what you want for your character. Now, one thing to note with powers is that you will be leveling up at a different rate than all the other players, because powers are based around skill points, which you get from gaining skills. So there are some small details in this. So whenever you, in the true RPG, whenever you roll a 1, when trying to do something, you rolling the d10, you roll a 1, you get a skill and a skill point. And so also when you start out the game, you start out with 5, that's actually like nothing. You start out with like 20 or so, depending on what the game master chooses. But you start out with a certain number of skill points to put into your powers, and if you have any left over, according to the DM's discretion, but this is usually what runs, is any leftover can be put into skills, so you can get bonus skills on top of the 5 that your DM usually gives you. So that's starting out with a character, but getting powers and leveling up throughout the game after the starting point, that's a little more complicated. So whenever you get a skill by rolling a 1, you get a skill point on top of that, but when you reach 10 skills, when you reach your maximum skills, you have that choice to swap out a skill or just leave it and keep your skills. So when you have that maximum and you've hit that maximum, you can actually get more skill points than normal. So when you choose to swap out a skill, you get 1 skill point. But if you choose to just do nothing, if you roll a 1 and you have your max skills, and you do nothing, then you get 2 skill points instead of the regular 1. Now, I'm talking all about these skill points. They are important, believe me. Skill points are the way that you can get new powers. So if you look on the power trees, you can see a little number next to the name of the power. And below that, you can see the description of the power and all that it holds. With that number, that is the number of skill points that you need to expend in order to get that power. But you need to start at the bottom of the tree and kind of work up from there. And so you need to go, there are lines that kind of connect the powers. You need to go from the bottom to the top. The exception to that is specialization, which is 3 skill point power, which just pretty much increases one of your skills to a +2 bonus rather than a +1 bonus. So the specialization power is an exception, as well as expertise, or expiro, I think it's called in weird because it's just weird. And expertise allows you to increase your skills. I think it's 5 skill points, and it's the same for every class. It's the same for every skill. You can only take it... I got that wrong again. It's the same for every stat. You can only take it once for each stat. So if, for example, you have a +2 bonus in Cool, then you can make that a +3 bonus by spending 5 skill points. And those skill points you get from failing things, from rolling ones on your D10 rolls for trying things and using your stats. Now, as for prerequisites, you can see that next to the number, in the little slot next to the description too, in the power tree, you can see that there's a prerequisite and then +1, whatever the stat is. So prerequisites, that means that you have to have that much of a bonus in that stat, like innately, before you can take that power. So you might sometimes need to take the expertise power before you can get certain really high up powers. This makes it so that if you are bad at a certain stat, if you're really low in a certain stat, you can't really get any powers with that. So you can only get powers in the stats that you are good at, like +1, +2, that kind of thing, +3 sometimes. There are no power trees for the size stat, the humor stat, and the childhood financial status stat, as well as the optional stats like the other ones that your DM might include for their campaign. Unless they want to make homebrew ones, there are no like official power trees for those stats. Now, onto magic. Magic is a little bit complex when it comes to the power trees because there are actually 2 power trees. So there's the normal weird power tree and then there's the graduated weird, which is when you finish or when you get to a certain point and you get the graduation power, which is like the top power in weird, then you get to restart. And the importance of this is when you go through and you have magic, you can only choose one school of magic, but once you get to graduation, you restart the tree, or you technically go onto the graduated power tree, and with that, you actually choose a second school of magic, and you go up with that. So all of the powers that you have in your weird tree, in your first one, don't actually impact. Like, for example, if you have a power that gives you a bonus to attack rolls, I think it's the Mancer power. If you have that power, it only applies to the first school that you had. And so if you go onto the graduated weird power tree, then those changes do not apply to the first one, and the first power tree's changes don't apply to the second. So when you have your schools of magic, they kind of branch out separately, and you can still get cantrip and invocation or incanter or whatever. You can still get all those, but it's separate. So you have to get those again, kind of thing, for each power tree. And you can keep going through that. There's also a power called Life Breather, which is 10 skill points, and it's somewhat near the beginning of the graduated weird tree. With the Life Breather power, you can specifically narrow in on your school of magic, or one of the two. You get to actually choose, when you go through the graduated weird tree, you get to choose which of the schools of magic you want to like narrow in on, and then you get a certain bonus just specific to that school of magic, and usually they're actually quite good, and they can like make your school of magic even more specific and like more powerful, but only for one of them. So if you want to specialize on your new school of magic, it's not that hard to do. Do note that Life Breather has an other section, and that other section at the bottom is pretty much just determined by your game master. If you have necromancy or summoning or some other sort of school of magic that isn't really canon, and it's a homebrew thing with your game master in their world, then they can make their own things under Life Breather if they want, and there's just that spot for that. Now, onto specialization. I think I mentioned it earlier, where when you have a skill, you can have +2 in that skill rather than the regular +1 bonus. So when you have specialization, which is a 3 skill point power, it can only go up to +2. When you get the specialist power or the master specialist power makes it so that you can increase that specialization bonus to +3, but the master specialist power makes it so that you can increase it indefinitely. Like, you can raise a skill as much as you want, just using specialization on it over and over again. So that's a really interesting thing to do. Both of those are in the Booksmart tree. It's a little bit expensive to get to that point, but then again, it's always expensive. It takes a while to kind of level up. And your game master can also increase that speed with the new fear factor, because when you have monsters and that sort of thing when they have that in their game, they can award almost like experience points, which is adding more skill points to everyone's like pools or whatever, so they can kind of level up and have powers more quickly. And so when that happens, they can pretty much level up their characters according to what they've done and their fights and how they've grown and how they've had near-death experiences, that sort of thing. So that is the power system with all the power trees. If you have any questions, specific powers, anything like that, feel free to ask in the comments. Leave a like if you actually like this video. Don't be disgenuine. We hope you have a wonderful time in your life, and enjoy if you're using the True RPG system. And if you are, yeah, leave that in the comments too. We'd love to hear about that. Farewell.